They accuse us of banning books, guys, because we take issue with bestiality books or some other kind of perverted book.
Every librarian,
everybody
bans books
sure
based on the budget.
Sure
they can't buy every
and we're
book.
opposed to these sorts of things. You guys ban books, but they ban Christian books. I mean, how many libraries have Paul Washer's books? Think about that for a moment. How many libraries have the sermons of Jonathan Edwards? And welcome, friends, to Generations. Kevin Swanson, your host, Bill Jack from Worldview Academy in studio. Also, Adam McManus, our host on theworldview.com, is with us on this edition as we update you on the Worldview News and Review. And what we're doing on this is we're taking a news story and we're developing on it in our commentary program. I think it's going to be helpful for our listening audience. This one's going to be fun. Adam, thank you for doing the Worldview program. And I know you've been faithful at this for 10 years, but why are we doing this? Because we want people to wake up to what's going on in the world around us. We're in a battle for the minds, the hearts, the souls of our children. And there is a worldview war going on between good and evil. Bad ideas, good ideas, and ideas have consequences. Good ideas have good consequences. Bad ideas will have bad consequences. That
bad
should be
ideas
obvious.
have victims.
Well, that's true too. In this case, children. And again, we see that children are going to be the victims of so much of the devastation that's going on in the public schools, public media, and the libraries. Okay, we don't talk about libraries very much because that's a safe place. Not, Adam?
No. My children and I often watch Leave It to Beaver, and there are a lot of episodes where Wally and the Beav are in the library looking up various books for reports they have to write, or reading the local paper or the New York Times or whatever it is. I guess the New York Times might not be that safe, but there is a person there, the librarian, who's basically enforcing the same standards that the parents had at home, and they have this books that would not be problematic in that library of the Leave It to Beaver world. But boy, there are so many parents who are unfortunately clueless about the dangers that lurk on the library shelves. And now, of course, you can check out DVDs, and I don't even know if they implement the PG-13 R ratings for these DVDs, or they let these kids check out whatever they want. But in Sacramento, California, 12 libraries are definitely not safe. They're offering something called sexual health cabinets inside the public libraries, giving access to condoms, sexually transmitted disease tests, and pregnancy tests. The cabinets are being stocked by none other than Planned Parenthood, the number one killer of unborn babies in America. Just in 2023 alone, they killed 392,715 babies. So this is a group that has about the most evil worldview known to man, and they do not affirm a biblical understanding of marriage or of sexuality. They think it's fine that people have sex before marriage. They think it's fine that people have sex with their own gender and do all kinds of unspeakable things. And they just say, well, just, be informed. Well, the QR code that's on this literature goes right to their website that goes into a lot more detail about what they think. And I agreed with what Michael Reed said in this CBS News story originally reported out there in Sacramento, who said it's a little shocking. It seems a little inappropriate just to target children that way. But Todd Deck, the Community Engagement Services Manager of Sacramento Public Libraries, defended it all, saying, well, we want to remove the stigma around these resources. Libraries are supposed to be an essential component in healthy, thriving communities. That's true, but they should not be offering condoms and sexually transmitted disease tests. And I think really worst of all, the Planned Parenthood propaganda. Greg Burt, I love him, vice president of the California Family Council, rejected the librarian's absurd worldview, said now parents have to be concerned, instead of their child coming back with a book, they're coming back with a condom. He said this is really all about cutting parents out, and it's about sexualizing our kids at younger and younger ages. So this is not something that's behind the librarian desk where you have to ask for it, or you have to have an ID, or you have to be an adult. It's out for anyone to grab, the literature, the condoms, the sexually transmitted disease tests, and they are emptying out very quickly. I don't know how many children are accessing this information and these products, but I don't think it's a good thing. In fact, I cited in the newscast that day, Matthew 18:6, which of course Jesus says, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. And the person that brought this initially to my attention is this wonderful lady, Elizabeth Johnston, Christian homeschool mother of 10, and she is known as the activist. I think the mommy activist, or the activist mommy, some nomenclature like that. But she looked up the American Library Association's one-time president, Emily Drabinsky, who served between July 2022 and 2024, who calls herself, quote, a Marxist lesbian, end quote, and even wrote a paper on, quote unquote, queering the catalog. In other words, introducing titles throughout the library, not just for the children, but for adults as well, in which there are going to be a lot of affirming books that affirm the homosexual worldview and transgender stuff. And so I warned at the very end, I said, you need to be aware that libraries are not your friend as a parent. You need to exercise caution. You need to go with your children if you need to check out books, because there is a lot to be concerned with. I don't know if a Planned Parenthood resource kit is coming to a library near you, but what happens in California often spills across the rest of America.
And Adam, it's not just the condoms that concern me, it's the propaganda. The LGBTQ agenda is just shot through the libraries. Just take a look at 100 books for kids, for teens in your average library and ask yourself, do I want my kids reading this junk? Wow. You take a look at what's happening at the American Library Association. And of course, you mentioned them. Emily Drabinsky is the self-avowed Marxist lesbian who's headed it up. I just looked at their 2024 annual report, and it's just nothing but LGBTQ stuff, wokey stuff. It's a list of 10 of their favorite books, every one of them LGBTQ type of books, encouraging children to all sorts of sexual perversion. And they're up in arms that there's anybody that might oppose their 10 favorite books. So the ALA's report on their 10 favorite books, which also happen to be the books that are increasingly resisted by certain parents across America, happen to be themed on sexual perversion and different forms of homosexual sex for 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and 10-year-olds. So I think really the propaganda and the worldview that is conveyed in the library, and obviously by the ALA and everything the ALA encourages, is extremely detrimental to the health of anybody, any society, even if it wasn't a Christian society. I don't think a Japanese society would like this. I don't think the Chinese society, I don't think any African society would like this. I don't think any pagan society would like this, but only a society like America that is self-destructing and doing everything it can possibly do to commit suicide in the social system. So it turns out that there are certain states that are so upset about what the ALA is doing that the legislatures have denied funding to libraries that are associated with the ALA. And that's been at least 8 states, if I'm not mistaken: Montana, Missouri, Texas, Alabama, Wyoming, South Carolina, and Florida so far have made moves to disassociate from the ALA. Now, do remember that only about 10% or 8% of funding of libraries comes from the federal government, which recently has been somewhat curtailed by Donald Trump, thanks be to God. And then secondly, the states offer about 8 or 9%, but the rest of it comes from local governments. Right. And these local governments, they are in love with the American Library Association. And they, I would say, just your average library is probably a cesspool and needs to be very carefully assessed, or just out and out avoided by every Christian family in that community.
And Christians need to be on library boards. and they will have the worst battle they've ever engaged in trying to get elected to library boards and then having their voice heard and making sure that these egregious books, these vile, wicked books, are not put in the hands of children. This is the battle of the day, and that is the other side has seen how they can infiltrate and inculcate their values into the children through the secular school system. Now they're doing it through the libraries as well. Christians need to rise up. They need to take control of the libraries. They need to pull their kids out of the state schools and become involved in parenting once again.
They accuse us of banning books, guys, because we take issue with bestiality books or some other kind of perverted book.
Every librarian,
everybody
bans books
sure
based on the budget.
Sure
they can't
do.
buy every
and we're
book.
opposed to these sorts of things. Like, you guys ban books, but they ban Christian books. I mean, how many libraries have Paul Washer's books? Think about that for a moment. How many libraries have the sermons of Jonathan Edwards? Hello? Is that anybody respond to that?
That's discriminatory.
Right. Or Calvin's Institutes. What about the really controversial books? What about my books? Okay, I've got Epoch. Have we had a single library in America? The ALA just contacted me, needs 500 copies of Epoch. Why are you laughing so hysterically
this
over
is a
that?
good idea. I would encourage Generations viewers, listeners to consider buying a copy of Epoch in addition to the one they already have in their library,
and donate
it in their personal library, and donate it to the local library and see what happens. See if they'll put it on the shelf.
The answer to this question, my friends, is this: we've got to defund the public libraries. I mean, we've got to get rid of public libraries. We can't be redistributing wealth. Libraries are Marxist to the core because they're funded by the redistribution of wealth. That's what's happening to these public libraries. I'm okay with private libraries. There are a few private libraries here and there. And
Right.
Bill, if you want to have a private library and put whatever books, you want to ban books, go for it. You want Paul Washer's books, go for it. I'm not really in the business of banning the books that are in your particular library. I'm not in that business. I'm just simply saying, let's get this out of the hands of the government.
Right.
That would solve a lot of problems, wouldn't it?
Yeah. The Carnegie system of libraries was founded by the billionaire Carnegie, and he wanted libraries in every small town he could. And there are many small towns, small communities around the country that have a building that was built by this donor.
And that's totally legit. That's totally legit.
Yes, because he wanted to encourage education. He wanted to encourage learning.
Legit. Carnegie wants to put his money down, build some libraries around America. More power to him.
But then the states
take over, and now look at it, corrupted. And there's two steps on this. First is for governments to step in and say, here, let me control all of this. And then the next thing that happens, they pervert it.
Right.
And they've corrupted it. And the American Library Association has stepped in, and the centralization of power over the libraries around America usually produces a corruption, a perversion, a liberalization, a socialization. The Marxist lesbians take over, and that's what's happened.
Yep.
Now, it's interesting, about 2 years ago, this would have been 2023, Adam. If you do the search, you're going to find about 2023, there were a series of news articles that went around in which conservatives began to see that the ALA was almost entirely woke. They began to see that the library system in America had turned Marxist, and they were encouraging the state governments to separate themselves from the ALA. And that's what happened with 8 states, but that doesn't solve the problem necessarily.
Well, and let's not forget that it's in the public libraries where these god-awful drag shows have been taking place for years.
Oh, yeah.
At taxpayer expense. I interviewed for this very program Derek Reimer, a wonderful Christian man in his 30s who has spoken out in Canada against these presentations where drag
just call them abominations. I think that's a good word. I'm thinking for a good word, Bill. Abominations. Call them abominations.
And even the librarians defend the drag queen abomination presentations hook, line, and they just back it up 100%. They think it's fantastic.
Yeah, they
and
did.
that reveals everything you need to know. These are men dressing as women in caricatures of women. No women actually look like this. with the heavy makeup and the big wigs and the big fake padded bras, etc., the high heels, 6-inch high heels, etc., and all the gaudy dress and the whatever. And the 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds are there, and the parents think this is just so open-minded. Isn't this wonderful that the taxpayer-funded library is hosting this drag queen abomination story hour? And it's part of their whole world view, their woke world view.
It's interesting that these drag shows show up in conservative counties like Douglas County here in Colorado. Or I heard a pastor friend from Iowa said they're bringing the same thing down into some country county in the state of Iowa.
Right.
What is it with this, Bill? I mean, are people accepting this?
Evil does not rest. Evil always advances, and it's going to advance wherever you are. So you think you're safe. This does not happen in my school. I used to hear that all the time when I was talking about the policies that were being foisted upon public school children. This is not happening in my school. It's happening somewhere else. No, the answer is it is in your school. It is in your library, and you need to be diligent as parents, protect your children, and you need to stand for liberty and go out and address this evil that is tyranny.
Well, privatize the library system. That's the solution here. And I think we're coming to the point at which, so much of this is going to be privatized. I think the mail system's going away. I think libraries are going away. I think that's where we're headed here. Here's a library system. Just found it. Only 1.1 million books were checked out, but that compared to 1.9 million books compared to 1.9 million movies, digital titles checked out in 2023. In other words, far, far more digital titles, movies, audiobooks, etc., far, far more checked out than just paper books, meaning that you can do that online. You don't need a place to go to do your 1.9 million digital titles. 46% of Americans did not read a single book last year. Only 19% of Americans read more than 10 books, meaning that they would have to go to a library for that. That's only 19% of Americans that would rely on a library, that would need a library. Only 19%. 80% of Americans are reading an average of 2 to 3 books a year. And if you buy those books, that's $50. And that's as much as libraries spend per capita. Average library is spending about $50 per person in America. If the average person's reading 2 to 3 books, just go buy those books. You don't need a library for that. It's a waste. It's a total waste of time. So either you can spend $50 per year buying your own books or just renting them for $5 a book, $10 a year, whatever, or let the government buy all your LGBTQ wokey books, and then you have to borrow them. So which is better? Besides, it would be much better to just rely on an online lending service at, say, $10 a whack, or a lending service for an ebook distribution, or sign up for Audible. I know so many people signing up for Audible now, $99 per year. It's much more convenient. There's much higher selection of items online. You don't have to fund a liberal organization like ALA with your tax money. It's time to defund libraries. Just walk away from it. It's a mess. Can't clean it up. It's not going to. It's not going to be revived. Put it out of its misery. That's where I'm at right now.
I'm surprised, Bill. I was not aware that there were elected library boards. I thought these were appointed. I didn't realize
Some
I've never
are.
heard of anyone.
Yeah, some are. Some are elected
to a library board.
Yep.
Okay. In Texas, they don't have that anyway.
Well, friends, what do you do? What do you do? Be discerning. That's what Adam said at the beginning of the broadcast. Be discerning, be discerning, be discerning. Don't just let your kids run around the library. Don't just let them loose in the library. Now, when I was a kid and we came upon our first library, I was probably 10 years of age because I was out in the mission field on an island, come back stateside, come into a library. I'm amazed, like, oh, all these books. It was a sight to behold. But I wasn't discerning. I had no idea. Now, I can remember myself being stumbled in a library. I remember exactly which library it was. I was stumbled as probably 11 or 12 years of age at the time. I was stumbled in that library. So that's 1976, something like that. 1976, Kevin Swanson stumbled in a library. I just admitted it. I don't think I've ever told anybody that. But I can remember being stumbled in a library at 11 years of age.
They make online pornography often available, and that's why they have these screens that are blurred if you're looking at it from the side, so only the person right in front of the computer screen.
No way. I don't believe that. They got that in libraries now?
Yes.
You're kidding me.
I think they do.
Oh, man.
No.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
Full-on
here's one more
X-rated
thing.
pornography.
Walk into those libraries and ask yourself a simple question. Are these Christian books? Where's the Christian book section? Can you do that, Bill? Next time you go to the library, you ask, where can I buy
They'll
Generations
probably be
curriculum?
confused by the
Where can I
question.
borrow the Christian books that are being produced from Lifeway and from Moody Press and Generations Press, et cetera? Where can I buy where's the Christian section of this library? There isn't one.
Probably doesn't exist.
So buy your own books.
They're shelved by topic and by subject, not necessarily by the overall worldview.
But okay, look through 200 books and ask yourself,
Right.
where's the Christian worldview undergirding these novels? And here's one more thing. Shuffle through about 6 or 8 books written for teens and then run as fast as you can. Bill, I'm serious here. Have you read some of these books written for teens?
Yeah, and this has been going on since the 70s, so it's nothing new. And librarians are the gatekeepers, and the librarians are the censors.
Yeah.
By very nature, the
Right.
budget,
They're making their choices.
they have to make choices based on a budget, so they are censors.
Sure they are.
So when they accuse parents of wanting to censor books, they're
doing that every day.
They're doing it daily. Yes.
Okay, and so the solution here, friends, is what if you said, okay, I realize this is going to be a little bit of a stretch for our family, but we're going to buy our own books and make an investment. And we're going to buy the classic Christian books for children that Generations has produced over the last 15 years. And Bill, we've got at least 25 of them, I would say, at this point. And we underprice them. We get them down to $12, $14 for hardbacks, not these cheapy paperbacks, but the cloth woven hardback Christian classics for kids available through Generations. We've got at least 25 of them out right now, and you can get them at generations.org and pay $15 for them. Okay, so you've got to invest, $250 per year for your own books versus running down to the local library and picking up Heather Has Two Daddies or whatever is coming off the ALA list. Friends, I encourage you to this. And maybe a sacrifice. You may have to avoid going to the movie theater. You may have to say, kids, we're not watching Disney movies this year. Instead, we're taking the $250 we typically put in entertainment and we're putting it into Generations books for kids. Some of the most solid Christian materials that we can find from Generations or other Christian publishers. Okay, well, that wraps up this edition of the Generations radio broadcast. My co-hosts today have been Bill Jack from Worldview Academy and Adam McManus from the worldview.com. And man, it's good to be having this discussion with you guys. Let's do this again sometime.
All right.
How about next week?
It sounds like a plan. Friends, you've been listening to Generations. This is Kevin Swanson and the team inviting you back again next time as we continue to lay down a vision for the next generation.